was just driving home and my brain was just in a weird place. And I was kind of feeling like there's a certain nostalgia to me to living in America, which is a weird thing to say because I've lived many places. You know, I lived in Singapore and Hong Kong, England, things like that. I've lived in the States for 10 years, a couple of years in Texas. I did 8 years in Arizona. But the thing is, I grew up on America. That's the thing, is that there's one thing that I love above all things, and that's movies. Movies are my favorite thing. I'm encyclopedic when it comes to movies. It's the way I want to spend my time. If I've got some time to myself, I want to watch a movie, a new movie, an old movie, a movie I've seen a million times. But so much of my American experience has been around seeing things that I saw in movies. I remember the first time I went to Los Angeles, I was like, oh, that's the police station from Beverly Hills Cop. One of my favorite movies. And anytime I'm on a road trip or I see something that I've seen in movies, like, oh, it's just like I saw in the movies. Though, of course, the movies do take some liberties. That's the way movies work. But it's also what taught me geography, because American geography is kind of weird. It's always like in movies that they talk about places like Seattle, Washington. You guys do it. You don't just say the place Seattle. You'll say the place and the state, which kind of taught me how things work, which is good, because when it comes to Washington, it is kind of confusing, because you're like, well, we've got Washington, the state, but then we've also got Washington, the capital. But it's not really the capital, it's the District of Columbia. And I'm like, but Columbia is a country in South America. Like, so what's Columbia got to do with this district? It's got nothing to do with it. Like Kansas City, where's that? Kansas? No, it's in Missouri. What? But it's also in Kansas? Huh? Vancouver has a Washington, but so does Canada. And it's like there's a Birmingham everywhere. It's confusing. It can be very confusing, but at the same time, I think that's why I do love living in America so much, living in Texas so much, is that how many movies have you seen set in America? How many movies have you seen set in Texas? And that's why I really love doing this podcast that I do. If you don't listen to podcasts, I only got into them about a year and a half ago when I was driving to Texas, because I had to drive for 17 hours and needed to stay awake. But it's just a fun way to share something that you really enjoy. And because I'm so raised on America and I love movies so much, I decided to start doing a podcast called The United States of a Movie, where every week we try to find one movie to define each state in the United States. And the reason I'm kind of confused about Washington, don't mind me, the cats come to join into this particular video, is because you got Washington the state and Washington DC, so we decided to do Washington state. So of course, we had to do Sleepless in Seattle, which I haven't watched for so long, and I have to be honest, what a treasure of a movie. But we also had to bring in some other stuff, like the big guns of First Blood, the very first Rambo movie. Now, when I was a kid, my dad showed us Rambo 3 first, then Rambo 2, then First Blood, which was a very different experience, because the first movie is actually quite grounded and is talking about PTSD. Then the second movie, he decides to win the Vietnam War. And then the third movie just wins the Cold War. I mean, ridiculous, but at the same time, so much fun. And then we also brought the movie Dante's Peak, with Pierce Brosnan. So James Bond takes on a volcano. I have to be honest, it was a great experience. And it was also an interesting debate to see where we ended up to figure out which one of those movies best defines Washington. Because weirdly enough, you know, First Blood was shot in Canada and Dante's Peak was shot in Idaho. But then Seattle is only just a small part of Washington, which is why it's such a fun podcast. And honestly, if you're looking to get into podcasts, we've now got 24 episodes of the United States of a Movie. So if you're looking to go on a big road trip, you're cleaning the house, you're exercising, and you want to just listen to something where we get into the movies, we make fun of the bad movies, we also really love the great movies, and also just get into a fun debate about America, check out the United States of a Movie podcast. You can find us wherever you enjoy podcasts, which is places like Spotify, Apple, Amazon. You can find us online if you want to, just by looking the United States of a Movie podcast. You can find us on Megaphone. But for the last 12 episodes or so, we've also started doing video. So you can watch us as a show on YouTube. I think our first ever episode we had was with Carrie Byron from Mythbusters. So by all means, join in the conversation. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Reddit. Tell us movies. Tell us if you're wrong. Tell us if you're right. Suggest movies for your home state. But also just come in and join the conversation, because the United States of a Movie podcast is my favorite thing that I do. Because it's actually like the most real me, because you're going to hear me talk about movies and get into it with my best mates and just have a good time. And I'd love for you guys to join in.